Thank you for joining us. I'm David Huff, the MBA Corporate Relationship Manager, and this is our latest episode of Curious Careers. I'm really happy to welcome Elizabeth onto the show. We're going to talk about the industry she works in, which is private equity, venture capital, her firm, which is Insight Partners, and her specific role, which is as a senior VP, Vice President at Insight Partners. Elizabeth, thanks a lot for joining us. How are you today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me, David.
Pleasure. Thank you. We'll dive right in to your industry, private equity, venture capital, PEVC. For someone who you've been working in the industry for quite some time now, could you tell us a little bit about what makes the industry different, unique, as opposed to, say, banking or investment banking?
Yeah, no problem. So private equity and venture capital are part of what's called private markets in the financial landscape. And that means it's companies that invest in opportunities that are not publicly traded. So capital flowing into private companies. And interestingly, people don't necessarily know this, but that makes up a huge part of the economy. Private markets control about a quarter of the US economy, and about 98% of companies that receive funding are private companies and not publicly traded. So a very important part of the economy, and very crucial for the economy to stay strong.
Excellent. That's a massive part of the economy. I didn't know it was so big. That's amazing. Yeah. For people who aren't familiar about the difference of private equity and venture capital, could you tell us what the key differences are, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So they all have the same goal, which is ultimately to invest in companies, either buy the entire company and ultimately sell it for a profit, or buy a piece of the company and ultimately sell it for a profit. But the key differences are primarily around the stage they get involved in and the size of the companies they get involved in. Private equity is looking at established businesses, and the check sizes, so the size of the investment that you typically make with private equity, is much larger, often billions of dollars. With venture capital, we invest in early stage companies. Those check sizes are much, much smaller, oftentimes small millions rather than several hundred. And they tend to be early stage companies that are fast growing, often tech businesses these days. And they need different things from the people that invest in. They need a lot more help at that stage than they do necessarily at the PE stage. I think the other key difference is also the controlling versus not controlling. A VC would invest, make minority investments, so you'd buy a small piece of the company. Yeah. Private equity can often buy the entire company or a controlling stake in the company, so larger than a 50% investment.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. That's really great, because that's an area that a lot of people don't understand the difference in. That was really clear. That's amazing. What attracted you to work in this space? What made you think, this is for me?
I don't think it was that well thought through. Yeah. I think what happened for me is the company that I work for is specifically concerned with tech investment. So we invest in tech companies only, or software businesses only. I come from a tech background, so it made a lot of sense for me to take those expertise into an industry that was related. We think of ourselves at Insight as software experts first, and then experts that happen to invest in software companies. So it was a very good fit for me personally, but I also like the diversity in the day-to-day. We evaluate hundreds of companies. I get to meet dozens of really exciting entrepreneurs. So that appealed to me and fits very well with what I'm interested in. I think the third thing is the size of the organization. So I've come from a very large corporate background. I've worked for many companies that have hundreds of thousands of employees earlier in my career. And I'm now at the point where I really enjoy the size of the organization. There's about, we're under 250 people. So although you don't know everybody, you know many people in the organization. So that attracted me at this point as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And how do you guys, as in you and your team and your firm, support the startup environment? How do you guys help that environment?
We do a number of things. We play two crucial roles. There's, quite frankly, there's a lot of capital around at the moment. This is probably a point in in software investment where there's more capital than really good opportunities. So you need to bring something else to the table to the startups. And we as a firm have built out a really large part of our total workforce to support companies with expertise other than capital. So helping them along the way in terms of all of the things that they may need to help them grow as a business. That often aligns to functional areas in an organization, so sales, marketing, finance, product, and that's where we help the startups most. Is probably less around the capital, but more around those expertise.
That's excellent. A lot of the startups that I talk to in my role, they want that more expertise. They're expertise hungry, more so than cash hungry, which is unique. I didn't know that before talking to a few startups. That's great that you help out in those areas. When you're looking to invest in a firm, what is it that you look for? Is there anything in particular you look for?
I mean, I can tell you what we look for because we're a tech investor and we're a SaaS investor, so software as a service. But in general, what everybody looks for is the two main things: is the market size, or what's called the total addressable market, so the TAM. How big is the potential pie? How big is the market? Am I going to, is my total win that I can sell to 3 customers or to 3 billion? Okay. So that's a very important one. And then product market fit. Do customers need my product, and how well am I addressing those needs with my specific product? And then for us specifically as a SaaS investor, there are 2 key metrics, which is customer acquisition rate. So how quickly are you adding new customers to buy your product? And then net dollar retention, which is a percentage of revenue from your existing customer base. So are they staying with you year on year in terms of the amount of money that they spend with you?
Okay, that's really good. Thank you. Say I'm a potential Steve Jobs and I'm an entrepreneur looking to attract investments. What would make me attractive in general? I know it's a generalized question, but what would make me attractive to investors?
Well, if you're Steve Jobs, you're in a good spot, because one of the most attractive things, certainly of early stage investment, is the entrepreneur's track record. So if you're a repeat entrepreneur and you've done it before, like Steve Jobs, then it'll be quite easy to raise money. That's not good news for those who haven't. Yeah. If you're not a repeat entrepreneur, I think it comes back to those same things. Look at the TAM. The total addressable market. And if your product only serves a very niche market, think of ways to expand the product to make the total addressable market bigger. Yeah. Product market fit is the other thing I mentioned before, which is an absolutely huge factor, regardless of what you're investing in what industry. So really make sure that you've got product market fit. And there's a really easy way to determine that, and we call it the leaky bucket syndrome. How much sales and marketing money do you need to spend to keep filling up your bucket when it's actually leaking at the bottom because you're losing customers as fast as you're gaining them? So if you need to spend a lot of sales and marketing money to keep your bucket filled up because there are holes at the bottom, then you don't have product market fit.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. A lot of our students, so we have masters and MBA students in particular at our business school. A question they often have is, what kind of people work in private equity, VC? Are they people with finance backgrounds? Are they people with software backgrounds like yourself? What type of people work in these kind of companies?
You can probably think about it 2 main. I mean, everybody needs HR people and finance people and tech people and legal people. That's in every industry, but that's not that's not the biggest part of the workforce. That's kind of hygiene. Everybody needs them. If you look at beyond that, it's basically in 2 main categories. You're either a domain expert or you're a functional expert. So by domain expert, I mean, we're a tech investor, so people with tech expertise will find a home in our company. Yeah. There are equally private equity firms that invest in oil and gas, or there are VC companies that invest in agriculture. So if you're an expert in one of those spaces, that's a very good entry point and a way to get in. And then obviously investor skills. So if you have an M&A background, or if you've come from either a company that have been through the journey, so an early stage startup that have been through an acquisition or that have raised several rounds of funding, so you know how the mechanics of that work, and then you can bring those skills in-house.
Excellent. That's really, really good information. I didn't think about people who had actually been through that journey from the entrepreneur side. It's really interesting. Thank you. onto your company, Insight Partners. For people who are unfamiliar with the brand, could you tell us a little bit about Insight Partners and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. We are the world's leading investor in high growth tech. We are 25 years old, and in VC and PE years, that we're dinosaurs or already grandpas. We have about $30 billion under management, and in the company's life, we've done 45 IPOs. So we're a very established firm. We are New York based. The majority of my colleagues are in New York City. And we have a very flexible and unusual approach because we straddle both PE and VC. Most firms do one or the other, which means that for us, we invest in businesses that are anything from 5 million to 500 million in annual revenue. So that's a very big spread. We invest about 60% of our capital in North America, about 22% in Europe, and 18% in Israel.
Okay. Nice, that's amazing. Thank you for that. A lot of our students, what they're particularly interested in when they look at firms is they ask, what is the culture like in that company? Is it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Please tell me, what's the culture like at Insight Partners?
It depends very much where you sit in the business in terms of the working hours, but what's the same no matter where you are. It's a really fun culture. It's one of certainly the place that I've worked where there's the most fun injected in everyday work. In terms of working hours, if you are in part of the organization that work on diligences, so that's evaluating the companies that we're about to invest in, they do often have long hours that are deal driven. So you work very hard for, meeting a couple of deadlines. So, the working hours there are, very akin to consulting firm working hours, where sometimes you have to put in long hours and then it might tail off again. But it doesn't matter where in the firm you work. We have 5 core values, which I can say pretty much everybody in the team embodies. And it's hunger to win. And everybody's really driven. It's a very, very ambitious group of people. A big heart. Everybody's always trying to do the right thing to each other, to the companies that we invest in, and the broader ecosystem. Very creative. I mean, you hear wonderful stories about some of our investment team or our sourcing team who camp outside entrepreneurs' offices, who, attend concerts that they know they're going to be at, and all sorts of other creative things to get to the entrepreneurs. Very scrappy. So we were determined, leaving no stone unturned when you want to achieve something. And then the last is a commitment to reinvention. Just when you think, we've just about got this, we know how it works and it's settled and it's done, then somebody comes and changes it because it can be better. So it's a fantastic environment to work in. And I think, certainly from my experience, the size of the company also, because it's a little bit smaller, you do feel that you have a family rather than just a company that you work for.
Excellent. That sounds like a fantastic culture. That's real outside the box thinking to actually turn up to a concert where the entrepreneur might be to secure that. That's fantastic.
They're very creative, our sourcing team. I stand in awe about how lateral they can think.
Absolutely. Would you be able to give us maybe a sneak peek into what Insight Partners' priorities are over the next 12 months? That's okay.
Yeah, to say that we're going to do something substantially different than we've done for the previous 12 months is probably not true. But let me tell you what we do and what we always do and what we'll continue doing, what's made us successful. We want to make sure that we can source and invest in the best companies. So we've invested a lot of money in both technology and people in our sourcing team. So finding the best deals out there. And that sounds quite simple. It's not. We evaluate 150,000 companies a year. Then we help grow our portfolio companies. So this is companies that we've very invested in. They're called portfolio companies. We help them grow their businesses by helping them with all those functional expertise that we have in-house. We do a lot of inorganic growth for our companies. That's acquiring companies for some that we've already invested in. So finding them smaller companies that they can invest in, or either companies that they can be acquired by if there's a lot of synergies. Yeah. And then follow-on investments are hugely important for us. So we keep a lot of our money back in our funds to do follow-on investments. So doubling down on those companies that we can see are clear winners and wanting to retain our investment in those.
Excellent. That's great. I think that's a fantastic strategy that you think the long term and how you can actually reinvest in a company when it's doing well. Fantastic. I'd like to move on to your role as a senior vice president at Insight Partners and really deep dive into see what you do on a day-to-day basis. Would you be able to tell me what your regular day looks like? Is there a regular day?
Yeah, there is of sorts. I spend my time doing three things really. First of all is helping win those deals. I mentioned before that, you know, we have to make sure that we invest our money in the right companies to begin with, because there's little that you can do after the fact when you've invested in a company that doesn't have what it takes. Yeah. So making sure we differentiate ourselves, and you can think of that part of my role as pretty much sales. So I have to sell insight to those potential entrepreneurs and to the leadership team of those companies, to tell them why we'd be the best partner for them and what we'd bring to the table. So that's one part of my role. The second part of my role is working with companies we've already invested in. So usually it's the CEO and the CRO, so the Chief Revenue Officer of those companies, helping them figure out how to grow their businesses faster. Yeah. And I do that through the third part of my role, which is building connections with C-level decision makers at large global companies. So a very large part of my role is talking to the people that would buy the tech from our portfolio companies. So if you think, for example, the CTO of a large bank, or the CIO, the Chief Information Officer of a large pharmaceutical company, I proactively build relationships with those people and have regular conversations with them about what they're trying to do in their digital strategy. And then I suggest some of the portfolio companies that we've invested in that they might want to take a look at, because it could solve some of their problems. So those are three. The third part, you know, my partner says I get paid to network, which is which is you know, dumbing it down slightly, but it is a very key component of my role, and I definitely enjoy it a lot.
Perfect. That's excellent. Like the scope of the stakeholders you work with is massive. You must really have to wear many different hats when speaking to maybe an entrepreneur versus a CFO of a large pharmaceutical company. How do you kind of wear so many hats? How do you work with those vast stakeholders?
Yeah, I think my corporate background has definitely helped. So I used to be on the other side of that coin. I used to run you know, digital transformation teams in large global corporates. So I used to be on the buy side. I used to have to work with suppliers like myself. And so I know how they think, I know how they operate, and I know the problems that they're trying to solve, and the complexity of those very large organizations. So I speak the same language. That's certainly one thing that helped. And with the entrepreneurs, I mean, I work with the C-level of most of the portfolio companies that we work with on a fairly regular basis. And there, you know, there's such a broad spectrum of personalities. You know, there's definitely the one thing that's universal to all of them is a real energy and a hunger to solve a particular problem. They just so focused on solving that one problem for their customer base. And that's, you know, it's addictive. You can't help but get infused by all of the energy in the room with those entrepreneurs.
Absolutely excellent. Sounds like a real high energy workplace. That's great. A lot of jobs have challenges. Everyone has challenges they need to solve in their workplaces. What challenges do you encounter, and most importantly, how do you overcome them?
So most challenges are related to people. You know, it's very rarely the technology that fails us. It's very rarely. It's usually, you know, there are people challenges. And I find that the best way to resolve challenges with people is by talking to them rather than about them. So I tend to be quite direct, and I go and speak to people. And the more you speak with people about things that might not be working well, the more you can understand their point of view and their perspective. So it helps just tackling things head on. I think that the one thing that I'm very lucky is that we have a very collaborative environment at work and an amazing team. And, you know, I always think that many heads solve a problem much more easily than one. So I speak to as many people as I can in my organization to solve a problem. and it works. You know, I wouldn't say it's certainly not crowdsourcing, but maybe call it team sourcing to problem solutions.
Excellent. I love that. Yeah, teams. Yeah, excellent. Love that. What do you enjoy about your role? Is there anything that really kind of sticks out that you're like, that energizes me to get up and go to work in the morning?
I'm going to sound quite smug, but I kind of enjoy everything about my role.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
Which, which is a lovely position to be in, because it's not always the case. I think the thing that I mentioned before about the energy of the entrepreneurs and just getting a real sense of the drive and the pure commitment. You know, some people have had tough journeys to get where they are as entrepreneurs, and for some it just came easy because they just had a wonderful idea. But it's really, really addictive and contagious to be around that energy for the entrepreneurs. I enjoy the fact that I'm working in an industry where I can really see tech changing the world we live in. You know, some things are, you know, small changes, but some things make wholesale changes to the way that we do things. And being at the epicenter of that is very exciting. Another thing that I enjoy about my role is just being able to use the skills that I have and the capabilities that I have. I have ended up in a role in my career where I can pull on so many things that I've done before to kind of bring it to a cohesive whole, and now be able to leverage it all to make, you know, where the sum of it's greater than the parts.
Excellent. That's amazing. That sounds like everything's going to come together. It's great. As we're still in a pandemic, I have to ask a COVID question. Lots of firms are, say, working from home. Lots of firms are being affected by COVID. How has COVID affected your business at Inside Partners?
Well, so two things. I mean, we've got a broad portfolio of companies. We have in our portfolio companies that are more directly affected by COVID. So those portfolio companies have had a harder time than others. So, you know, the typical ones that you see in the news, those related to travel and to the service industry, etc. But on the whole, we've seen huge tailwinds from COVID. So just the explosion of tech, the growth in tech. You know, there's been, over the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a lot of talk about digital transformation in large corporate businesses. It's now their hands have been forced by COVID. So those who were slow adopters or late adopters or reluctant adopters, they're all in. So for us, you know, from our perspective as a firm, we've seen tremendous tailwinds from COVID because we're invested in tech. That's, you know, we're in a lucky position to be invested in tech. For us internally in the firm, you know, we're headquartered in New York, and our team was remote anyway. So it hasn't really, my day-to-day hasn't really changed substantially. More Zoom calls than before, but we work very well remotely, and I think we'll certainly retain some of that remote working going forward.
Excellent, thank you. Final question before I let you go, because I know you're busy. What advice would you give to an MBA or a master's student who's listening to this and wants to break into a career in VC or private equity? Would you have any advice you could offer them, please?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't speak to the rest of the industry because I don't know how others hire, but we tend to hire people into our firm in two places. We tend to hire into the investment team straight out of university, and train those people up ourselves because we've got a very clear view of what skills we want them to learn. We have a very proprietary sourcing engine, that 145,000 companies that we speak to per year. We train people up how to do that and how to do that successfully. So if another firm is like us, concentrated on hiring in very young out of university, then try and understand which campuses they recruit from and where they go. And if you don't get in that way, try a different route, try a sideways route. I mentioned before that we hire people in with operator experience. Go and work for a fast growing startup. Find yourself a very key role in one of those fast-growing startups and get through to their acquisition or their IPO or whatever it is, and then try and get into a private equity venture capital firm that way. If you want to be on the operating side, make yourself an expert in a particular functional area, enterprise sales or pricing or, product development, so that you can get into the operating side of the business with a very core skill set related to how that firm supported startups and scale-ups.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for that. I think that's great advice for our students, especially about taking a lateral step. I think that's amazing. Thank you. And that was an amazing interview. I think there was great information there in the regards to the industry, in regards to Insight Partners. And thanks a lot for sharing about your role as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure, David. Have a good day.
Thank you. For our audience, Curious Careers, this is the latest episode of Curious Careers. Please make sure to check back in, and you can see all of our past episodes on the same platform as you've seen this episode. Thank you. Bye.